Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about alcohol and prohibition, some of the consequences and effects that it had on the country. Now, to really understand prohibition, we need to know a little bit about the history of alcohol in this country. It's been available in the Americas ever since the first European settlers landed here. During these days, beer, wine, and ciders were the beverages of choice, and these drinks were often considered safe alternatives to questionable water supplies. In these days, they didn't have the public works that we do today that ensure that we have safe drinking water. Taverns also played an important role in the early years of this country as they offered men places to go to discuss politics, business, and many other issues. Men drank on all sorts of occasions in these days, anything from baptisms to public hangings. And really, men drank on a daily basis, and this included at work during break times. Now, this was not that big of a deal when you're talking about beer and wine with relatively low alcohol contents. By the 1800s, distilled spirits, which had much higher alcohol contents, were becoming increasingly available. And as men continued their old drinking habits, uh, there was an increase in drunkenness. Drunkenness had all kinds of negative effects on family and society. During the 1800s, men were spending more money on alcohol a year than all the total of all federal expenditures. This had devastating consequences for many women and children who went without food and shelter. Wives were often subjected to violence as there was no police protection for domestic violence, and divorce did not exist. There are also negative effects on society as poorhouses, asylums, and prisons were being filled with these drunks, which had effect on the workforce as there were not as many able-bodied men to perform work. And to quote Benjamin Rush, who was a prominent doctor in the 1800s, who said that spirituous liquors destroy more lives than the sword. War has its intervals of destruction, but spirits operate at all times and seasons upon human life. This was from a PBS documentary titled Prohibition by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick. Now, the costs were high, especially on social services like hospitals and police forces, which were being overburdened by this increase in drunks in the country. This led to a support of prohibition, and in the early 1900s, temperance movements were started. And generally, in the early years, women took a more active role in these organizations, such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Now, later in the 1800s, men became more involved and started the Anti-Saloon League, which mixed religion, politics with the temperance movement, and this became very effective in eventually leading to prohibition. Local governments were also often in favor of prohibition. For instance, Maine, which was the first state to outlaw alcohol in 1851. Several other states followed after Maine had outlawed alcohol. Now, while there were groups that were supportive of prohibition, there were also groups that were opposed to it. Lots of immigrants who came to America after the Civil War, and hundreds of thousands of them from places like Ireland, Germany, Bohemia, and other areas in North and Central Europe. And these immigrants' everyday life consisted of drinking. A lot of these immigrants went on to start their own brewing companies like Eberhard Anheuser, Valentin Blatz, Adolphus Busch, and many of them became very rich. And eventually they started lobbying organizations such as the United States Brewers Association, which was founded in 1862. Now, although the federal government did pass a prohibition, they weren't always as in favor of it. For instance, the same year that the United States Brewers Association was founded, as much as 1/3 of the federal government's budget came from the licensing of the manufacture of alcohol as well as sales taxes from alcohol. Although Prohibition did come to be passed on January 7th of 1920, and it was intended to improve the family situation and combat the scourge of alcohol that was affecting millions of people and devastating families and ruining lives. It was also intended to have a positive effect on society, and it was kind of a promise that the government would be able to improve society. Although soon after Prohibition was passed, there was a large increase in the number of crimes associated with alcohol, lots of minor crimes such as bootlegging and speakeasies, even corruption by police officers, and families often made their own home brews and sold them to neighbors. And it was even said that President Harding, while he was in the White House during these years, served liquor at his twice weekly poker games. There was also a steep increase in severe crimes, gangs and organized crimes. There were bloody gang wars fought over the control of the distribution of alcohol. Some prominent citizens in the country, for instance, a Seattle police officer and a defense attorney in Chicago, turned to a life of crime and really became some of the most successful criminals in the country selling alcohol. The government even broke laws and violated long-standing rights in the Constitution when enforcing prohibition. So while prohibition was intended to have positive effects and did have some positive effects, the negative effects of crime and really a lack of adequate law enforcement proved to be too much, and prohibition was ended when the 21st Amendment was passed on December 5th of 1933. I hope you guys found that to be insightful, and I look forward to your guys' speeches. Thank you.